You can't become a mother. He slapped her and divorced her in front of his mum. 10 years later, she crashed his wedding with twins and shattered his world. Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. Today, I come to you not with my voice, but with my heart wide open. I'm not well, my family. My body is weak, but my spirit is still strong. Because of you. Though I can't narrate today, I'm still here, behind every word, every emotion, every heartbeat of this story. My dear brother James will be your voice today, but make no mistake, the story still comes from me, written with love, through pain, for you. But I need to share something with you from deep within. Some of my competitors have been reporting my channel. Yes, I even received a warning email. They want to break what we've built together. But what hurts even more is the quiet from some of you. My family. I've always given you my soul through these stories. Now I just need you to stand with me, not with money, not with pity, but with love. So please, like this video, leave a comment, share your heart. Let them see we're still standing together. And most importantly, watch the full video. Don't leave halfway. Every second matters. Every view, every moment, it keeps our home alive. This channel isn't just a place for stories. It's a home for hearts like yours and mine. And I believe with all my soul that love will win. So until I return stronger, let James speak for me. Close your eyes, open your heart, and let the story begin.
The sterile white walls of Dr. Richardson's office seemed to close in around Monica Sayovich as she sat across from the fertility specialist, her husband Jeff's hand growing cold in hers. 3 years of trying, 3 years of hope turning to desperation with each negative pregnancy test, and now this moment would define everything that came after. "I'm sorry, Monica," Dr. Richardson said, his voice gentle but clinical. "The test results show severe endometrial scarring from your previous surgery. Natural conception will be extremely difficult, if not impossible." Monica felt the world tilt on its axis. She'd suspected this day might come, but hearing the words spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. She turned to Jeff, searching his face for the comfort she'd always found there, but his expression was unreadable, distant. "What are our options?" Monica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "IVF could be attempted, though success rates would be low given the extent of scarring. There's also adoption, surrogacy." "We'll think about it," Jeff interrupted, standing abruptly. "Thank you, Doctor." The drive home was suffocating in its silence. Monica stared out the window at the Chicago suburbs where they'd planned to raise their children, where they'd walked through neighborhoods pointing out houses with good schools and big backyards. Now those dreams felt like cruel jokes. "Jeff, we need to talk about this," Monica said as they pulled into their driveway. "Not now, Monica. I need to process this." But Monica could see it in his eyes already. The withdrawal, the disappointment, the way he wouldn't quite look at her anymore. As if her body's betrayal was somehow a personal failing, a broken promise she'd made to him. Inside their home, Jeff went straight to his office and closed the door. Monica found herself alone in the kitchen, sinking into a chair at the table where they'd planned to help their children with homework. The front door opened and Monica's heart sank further. Cordelia Hankins swept into the house like a storm front, her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer suit a stark contrast to Monica's tear-stained face and simple dress. "Jeffrey called me," Cordelia announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "He told me about your situation." Monica bristled at the way her mother-in-law said situation like it was something shameful. "It's not a situation, Cordelia. It's a medical condition." "Is it?" Cordelia's pale blue eyes were as cold as winter ice. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you've failed at the most basic function of being a wife." The words hit Monica like physical blows. She'd endured 3 years of Cordelia's subtle digs about when she'd give them grandchildren, 3 years of pointed comments about other daughters-in-law who'd already produced heirs. But this was different. This was cruelty with surgical precision. "That's not fair," Monica said, standing to face the older woman. "I didn't choose this." "Didn't you?" Cordelia moved closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You knew Jeffrey wanted children, a large family. It's what the Hankins men have always had. And you can't even give him one child." "There are other options." "Other options." Cordelia laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Adoption. Raising some other woman's bastard. IVF with your damaged body. You think any of that is what my son deserves?" Monica felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not in front of this woman who'd never accepted her, who'd spent 4 years of marriage making Monica feel like an outsider in her own life. "Jeffrey deserves better than a broken woman," Cordelia continued. "He deserves a real wife, a fertile wife, a woman who can give him the legacy the Hankins name requires." "The Hankins name," Monica's voice rose with fury. "What legacy? Your family business is failing. Jeff works 60 hours a week trying to save a company that your husband ran into the ground. What exactly are we preserving here?" Cordelia's face flushed red with rage. "How dare you?" "How dare I what?" "Tell the truth. You want to talk about failure? Let's talk about how you've raised a son so weak he can't stand up to his own mother. Let's talk about how you've manipulated every relationship he's ever had because you can't stand the thought of sharing him." The slap came so fast Monica didn't see it coming. Cordelia's palm cracked across her cheek with enough force to snap her head sideways. Monica stood there, stunned, her hand rising to touch the burning skin. "You will not speak to me that way in my son's house," Cordelia hissed. "This is my house too," Monica said quietly, but even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if that was still true. Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced Jeff's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face haggard, his usually neat brown hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "What's going on?" he asked, though his eyes didn't quite meet Monica's. "Your wife was just explaining to me why she thinks she deserves to stay married to you, despite being unable to fulfill her most basic duty," Cordelia said smoothly. Monica watched her husband's face, waiting for him to defend her, to tell his mother she was out of line. But Jeff just stood there, his jaw working silently. "Jeff," Monica said softly, "tell her to leave." "Mom's just worried about our future," Jeff said finally. "Our future?" Monica felt something cold and final settling in her chest. "What future is that exactly?" Jeff looked at his mother, then back at Monica, and in that moment of hesitation, Monica saw everything she needed to know. 4 years of marriage, 4 years of love and laughter and dreams, and it all came down to this. When forced to choose, he would always choose Cordelia. "I can't do this anymore," Jeff said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for hours. "I can't pretend this is what I wanted. I married you because I loved you, but love isn't enough when you can't give me what I need." "What you need?" Monica's voice was dangerously quiet. "Children, Monica. A family. A real family, not some pieced-together arrangement with doctors and procedures, and hope that probably won't work anyway." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the antique clock on the wall, a wedding gift from Monica's grandmother. She looked at this man she'd loved, this man she'd built a life with, and saw a stranger. "You're really doing this," she said. It wasn't a question. "You can't be what I need you to be," Jeff said, his voice rising with frustration. "You can't give me children. What's the point of staying married to someone who can't fulfill the most basic purpose of marriage?" "The most basic purpose?" Monica's voice was dangerously quiet. "Not love? Not partnership? Not standing by each other when life gets difficult?" The most basic purpose is my ability to produce children. Don't make this ugly, Monica. Don't make this ugly. Monica laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your mother just slapped me in my own kitchen and told me I'm not a real woman, and you're worried about me making things ugly. Jeff's eyes flicked to his mother, and Monica saw the guilty knowledge there. He'd known Cordelia would come here. He'd probably told her to come here. A woman who can't give my son children isn't a real wife, Cordelia said again, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. And that's when Jeff's control finally snapped. She's right, he shouted, his face red with frustration and grief and rage. You can't become a mother. You'll never be able to give me what I want most in this world, so what's the point? The words hung in the air like poison. Monica felt something inside her chest shatter completely, something that could never be repaired. Get out, she whispered. Monica, get out! The scream tore from her throat with such force that both Jeff and Cordelia took a step back. Both of you, get out of my house! And then Jeff's hand was moving, fast and vicious, catching her across the cheek with a crack that echoed through the kitchen. Monica stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face, staring at this man who had just struck her. It's not your house anymore, Jeff said, his voice cold and final. I want a divorce. Monica stood there, her cheek burning from 2 slaps in one night, watching the man she'd loved transform into someone she didn't recognize. Cordelia smiled behind him like she'd won some twisted prize. Fine, Monica said, her voice steady despite the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. But I want you to remember this moment, Jeff Hankins. I want you to remember the night you chose your mother over your wife. Because someday, when you're old and alone, and wondering why nothing in your life ever worked out the way you planned, I want you to remember that you did this. You chose this. She walked to the front door and opened it wide, the cold October air rushing in to fill the space where her marriage used to be. Get out of my house, both of you, and don't ever come back. As they left, Cordelia's satisfied smile was the last thing Monica saw before she closed the door and collapsed against it, finally allowing herself to break completely. Her marriage was over. Her dreams of motherhood seemed impossible, but somewhere in the deepest part of her heart, a tiny flame of defiance flickered to life. She would survive this. She would rise from these ashes. And someday, somehow, she would make them both pay for this night. Chapter 2. Phoenix in Ashes. 6 months had passed since the night Monica's world imploded. 6 months of dividing possessions, of lawyers, of Jeff refusing to meet her eyes. The divorce papers had been signed 3 weeks ago, and Monica was finally, officially, alone. She stood in the tiny studio apartment she'd managed to afford in Chicago's Logan Square neighborhood, a far cry from the suburban house she'd shared with Jeff. The walls were thin, the neighbors were loud, and the radiator clanged like it was harboring angry spirits. But it was hers. Every cramped square foot belonged to her and no one else. The nausea hit her like a freight train as she bent to unpack another box. Monica rushed to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before her stomach emptied itself violently. She'd been feeling off for weeks now, tired, queasy, emotional, beyond even what the divorce warranted. She'd attributed it to stress, to grief, to the upheaval of rebuilding her entire life from scratch. But as she sat on the cold bathroom floor, her head spinning and her hands shaking, a terrifying thought crept into her mind. No, she whispered to the empty apartment. That's not possible. But even as she said it, Monica was calculating dates in her head. The night before Jeff had asked for the divorce, they'd made love one last time. She thought it was reconciliation, a bridge back to each other. Instead, it had been goodbye. An hour later, Monica stood in the pharmacy aisle, staring at pregnancy tests like they were instruments of torture. Her hands trembled as she reached for the most expensive one, as if paying more would somehow change the outcome. Back in her apartment, Monica paced the small space while waiting for the test to process. 3 minutes had never felt so eternal. When the timer on her phone finally rang, she approached the bathroom counter like she was walking to her own execution. 2 pink lines stared back at her. Positive. Monica sank to the floor, the test clattering from her nerveless fingers. Pregnant. After 3 years of trying, after the devastating diagnosis, after losing Jeff because she couldn't conceive, she was pregnant. The irony was so cruel it would have been funny if it weren't destroying her all over again. She called in sick to her temp job at the insurance office and spent the day in a daze, alternating between terror and a strange, fierce joy. By evening, she'd made her decision. She had to tell Jeff. Whatever had happened between them, he deserved to know he was going to be a father. Monica's hands shook as she dialed his number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Jeff, it's Monica. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back." He didn't call back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. On the 4th day, Monica tried again. This time, a woman answered. "Hello?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. "I'm sorry, I was calling for Jeff Hankins." "Who is this?" Monica's stomach clenched. "This is Monica, his ex-wife. I need to speak with him." There was a pause, then the sound of the phone being covered and muffled conversation. When the woman came back on the line, her voice was colder. "Jeff doesn't want to speak with you. Please don't call this number again." "Wait, please, I just need—" The line went dead. Monica stared at her phone, disbelief warring with growing panic. She tried calling again, but this time it went straight to voicemail. Jeff had blocked her number. That weekend, desperate and running out of options, Monica drove to Cordelia's house. If Jeff wouldn't take her calls, maybe his mother would at least listen. Maybe family loyalty would mean something when it came to a grandchild. Cordelia answered the door in a silk blouse and pearls, as if she'd been expecting company for tea rather than her despised former daughter-in-law. "What are you doing here?" Cordelia's voice could have frozen the water. "I need to speak with Jeff. It's urgent." "Jeffrey is busy. He's moving on with his life, as he should. I suggest you do the same." "Cordelia, please, I'm pregnant." The words hung between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Monica watched Cordelia's face carefully, expecting shock, maybe even joy at the prospect of a grandchild. Instead, she saw calculation, and then something that looked almost like hatred. "Pregnant?" Cordelia's voice was deceptively calm. "How interesting. And who's the father?" Monica felt like she'd been slapped again. "Jeff is the father. This baby was conceived before our divorce." "So you claim." "I'm not claiming anything. I'm telling you the truth." Cordelia stepped closer, her voice dropping to that familiar venomous whisper. "The truth. The truth is that you're a desperate woman who's realized she made a mistake. The truth is that you're trying to trap my son with some other man's bastard." "That's not the truth," Cordelia continued, her voice rising now, "is that Jeffrey has found someone else, someone better, someone who can actually give him what he needs. And you pathetic creature, are trying to ruin his happiness with lies." Monica felt tears burning behind her eyes. "This isn't a lie. This baby is Jeff's child." "Even if it were," Cordelia said, and now her smile was pure venom. "Do you really think Jeffrey wants anything to do with you? Do you think he cares about some mistake from his past life? He's moved on. He's happy. And I will not let you destroy that. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I just thought he should know. He doesn't want to know. He doesn't want to see you, hear from you, or have anything to do with you ever again. And if you try to contact him, if you try to force this fantasy of yours on him, I will make your life a living hell." Cordelia stepped even closer, her perfectly manicured finger pointed at Monica's chest like a weapon. I have money, connections, and influence that you can't even imagine. I will destroy you in court. I will have you declared an unfit mother. I will make sure you lose everything, including that baby, if you don't disappear from our lives completely." Monica stood there, stunned by the naked cruelty in the older woman's voice. She'd known Cordelia disliked her, but this was pure evil. "You can't mean that." "Try me," Cordelia said. "Walk away now, and I'll let you keep your little secret. Keep trying to force your way back into Jeffrey's life, and I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd never been born." Monica looked into those cold blue eyes and saw the truth there. Cordelia would do exactly what she threatened. She had the resources and the ruthlessness to make good on every word. "Fine," Monica said quietly. "I'll go. But someday, Cordelia, someday you're going to regret this. Both of you." As Monica walked back to her car, she felt something shifting inside her. The scared, desperate woman who'd come here begging for scraps of acknowledgement was dying, and something harder, stronger, was being born in her place. She drove to the lake, to the spot where she and Jeff used to watch sunsets during happier times. The water was gray and choppy, reflecting the cloudy sky. Monica sat on a bench and placed her hands on her still flat stomach. "It's just you and me now," she whispered to the baby growing inside her. "But that's okay. I'm going to be enough. I'm going to be everything you need." The next morning, Monica called her supervisor at the temp agency and quit. Then she called the admissions office at Northwestern University Law School. "I'd like to inquire about your part-time evening program," she said. If Jeff and his mother thought they could erase her from their lives, they were wrong. If they thought she would disappear quietly into the night, they had vastly underestimated who she was becoming. 3 weeks later, at her first prenatal appointment, Monica discovered she was carrying twins. As she stared at the ultrasound screen showing 2 tiny heartbeats, she felt a fierce protective love unlike anything she'd ever experienced. "2 babies," Dr. Patel said with a smile. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Monica whispered, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness or fear. These were tears of determination. She was going to raise these children alone. She was going to become a lawyer. She was going to build a life so magnificent that Jeff and Cordelia would choke on their own cruelty. And someday, when she was ready, when she was powerful enough to protect her children from their poison, she would make sure they knew exactly what they had thrown away. The phoenix was rising from the ashes of her old life, and she was going to burn brighter than they ever imagined possible. Chapter 3. 2 Hearts, 1 Warrior. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on a bitter February morning, 8 weeks before Monica's due date. She woke up in her studio apartment, water breaking across the sheets she'd just washed, with no one to call and no one to help her to the hospital, except the ambulance she couldn't afford. "Please," she whispered to the babies inside her as another contraction tore through her body. "Not yet. Mama's not ready yet." But Darius and Maximus Sehovich had their own timeline. They arrived at Chicago General Hospital after 14 hours of labor, tiny and perfect, and fighting for their lives in the NICU. Monica, exhausted and terrified, pressed her face against the glass of their incubators and made them a promise. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered to their sleeping forms, connected to more wires and tubes than seemed possible for such small bodies. "But I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to be everything you need." The hospital's social worker, a kind woman named Carmen Rodriguez, found Monica crying in the pumping room 3 days later. "Honey," Carmen said gently, "is there anyone I can call for you? Family? The baby's father?" Monica looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "There's no one. It's just us." Carmen sat down beside her. "That's not true. There's a whole network of support out there for women like you, single mothers, students, women rebuilding their lives. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it." Carmen was right. Over the next weeks, as Darius and Maximus grew stronger in the NICU, Monica discovered an underground network of women who understood her struggle. There was Deshawn, a nurse who worked the night shift and let Monica stay past visiting hours. There was Professor Williams from Northwestern, who helped Monica defer her law school admission until the fall when the babies would be older. There was Mrs. Chen from down the hall, an elderly widow who offered to babysit in exchange for help with her groceries. When the twins finally came home after 6 weeks in the hospital, Monica's tiny studio had been transformed. Donated baby furniture filled every corner. Diapers and formula lined the shelves. A changing table that folded down from the wall created a nursery in the space that had once been her dining area. "Thank you," Monica whispered to the empty room, overwhelmed by the kindness of near strangers who had rallied around her and her sons. The first months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Monica worked part-time at a legal aid clinic during the day, while Mrs. Chen watched the babies, then came home to feed them, play with them, love them with an intensity that sometimes scared her. Every milestone felt like a victory. When Darius smiled for the first time, Monica cried. When Maximus rolled over, she called Deshawn at the hospital just to share the news with someone who would understand. But it was when they were 6 months old that Monica truly understood the magnitude of what she'd undertaken. She was in the middle of changing Maximus when Darius started crying in his crib. As she reached for him, still holding a soiled diaper, Maximus rolled off the changing table. Monica lunged forward, catching him just before he hit the floor, but the motion sent her crashing into the wall. She sat on the floor of her apartment, both babies crying, her shoulder throbbing from the impact, and sobbed along with them. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't do this alone." But even as the words left her mouth, Monica was getting up. She settled both babies in their bouncy seats, gave them each a toy, and made herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. She could do this. She had to do this. These beautiful boys were counting on her. When fall arrived, Monica started law school 3 nights a week while working full-time at the legal aid clinic. The director, impressed by her determination and intelligence, had promoted her to paralegal with a salary that barely covered their expenses. She'd never been so exhausted. Her days began at 5 a.m. with feeding the twins, followed by 8 hours at the clinic, then home to spend precious time with Darius and Maximus, before heading to Northwestern for classes that didn't end until 10 p.m. She studied during lunch breaks, on the train, and in the quiet hours after the boys slept. Her professors didn't know she was a single mother. Her classmates assumed she was just another part-time student trying to balance work and school. Only Carmen Rodriguez, who checked in on her monthly, knew the full scope of what Monica was attempting. "You're trying to do too much," Carmen warned during one of their coffee meetings. "Something's going to give." "No," Monica said firmly, watching Darius and Maximus play in the legal aid clinic's small playroom. "I'm going to make this work. They deserve better than a lifetime of struggle." And somehow, impossibly, she did make it work. Monica's grades were stellar, partly from desperation and partly from the fierce intelligence that had always been her greatest asset. She discovered she had a gift for family law, for understanding the pain and complexity of broken relationships. Her professors began to take notice. The twins thrived too. At 18 months, they were walking and talking, bright and curious, and utterly devoted to their mother. Darius was the more serious of the two, always watching and thinking before he acted. Maximus was pure energy, climbing on everything and charming everyone he met with his infectious laugh. "Mama," Darius said one evening as Monica helped them build a tower with blocks, "why don't we have a daddy?" Monica's hands stilled on the blocks. She'd been dreading this question, but knew it would come eventually. "Some families have a mommy and a daddy," she said carefully. "Some families have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, And some families, like ours, have just a mommy who loves her boys so much that she's enough for everyone. But other kids have daddies, Maximus added, not understanding the weight of his words. I know they do, baby. And maybe someday we'll have more people in our family. But right now it's just us three, and we're perfect exactly as we are. That night, after the boys were asleep, Monica allowed herself a moment of grief for the family she'd imagined when she was married to Jeff. The suburban house, the family dinners, the help with bedtime routines and school events. She mourned it briefly, then pushed the sadness away. She couldn't afford to dwell on what might have been. By the time the twins turned 2, Monica had completed her first year of law school with a 3.8 GPA. She'd also been offered a full-time position at the legal aid clinic with benefits and a salary that would allow her to move to a 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood. "You're amazing, you know that?" Deshawn told her as they watched Darius and Maximus play in the hospital's family waiting room. Monica had brought them for their checkups, and Deshawn had insisted on seeing how big they'd grown. "I'm just doing what needs to be done," Monica said, but she felt a flush of pride. She was amazing. She was raising 2 brilliant, beautiful children while earning a law degree and building a career. She was doing something she would have thought impossible 3 years ago. "Their father doesn't know what he's missing," Deshawn said quietly. Monica watched her sons, now sturdy toddlers with their father's green eyes and her own determination written in every line of their small bodies. "No," she said finally. "He doesn't. But that's his loss, not theirs." As they left the hospital that day, Darius riding on Monica's shoulders while she carried Maximus, Monica caught their reflection in the glass doors. She looked tired but strong, her law school bag slung across her body, her sons healthy and happy in her arms. She thought about Jeff and Cordelia, probably assuming she'd disappeared into obscurity, that their cruel dismissal had been the end of her story. They had no idea that every harsh word, every moment of cruelty, had been fuel for the fire that was driving her forward. They had no idea that Monica Sejovic was becoming someone they would never recognize, someone powerful, someone who could protect her children from anyone who tried to hurt them, someone who was going to make them pay for what they'd stolen from her sons. But first, she had to finish building herself into the woman she was meant to be, the woman who would someday crash their perfect world with the truth they'd tried so hard to bury. "Come on, my beautiful boys," she whispered as they walked toward the bus stop. "Let's go home and conquer the world together." Chapter 4. Queen of Her Own Kingdom. 5 years after graduating law school summa cum laude, Monica Sejovic stood in the corner office of her downtown Chicago law firm, looking out at the city skyline that had once seemed impossibly far from her tiny studio apartment. The brass nameplate on her mahogany desk read, "Monica Sejovic, founding partner Sejovic and Associates," and every time she saw it, she felt a surge of fierce pride. The law firm specialized in family law, but not the kind that handled amicable divorces and simple custody arrangements. Monica's practice was a fortress for women at war, women fighting abusive husbands, women whose children had been threatened, women who'd been left with nothing and needed a warrior to help them reclaim their lives. "Mrs. Patterson is here for her 3 o'clock, her assistant Elena announced through the intercom. Monica straightened her Armani blazer and checked her reflection in the window. At 32, she'd grown into her power. Her black hair was styled in a sophisticated bob that framed her face perfectly. Her makeup was flawless but understated. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who could walk into any courtroom and command respect. Mrs. Patterson was a slight woman with haunted eyes and carefully concealed bruises on her wrists. Monica had seen 1,000 women just like her, and each one rekindled the fire that had been burning in her chest for the past 8 years. "Tell me what happened," Monica said gently, settling into the chair across from her client rather than behind her imposing desk. Over the next hour, Mrs. Patterson's story unfolded. The gradual escalation of control, the financial abuse, the threats against her children if she tried to leave. It was a story Monica knew by heart, with variations she'd heard countless times. "He says no judge will believe me," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "He says I'll lose my kids if I try to leave." Monica reached across and took the woman's trembling hands in hers. "Mrs. Patterson, look at me. He's lying. I'm going to make sure you and your children are safe, and I'm going to make sure he pays for every moment of fear he's put you through. That's a promise." And it was a promise Monica never broke. Over the past 5 years, she'd built a reputation as the lawyer you called when the odds were impossibly stacked against you. She'd faced down some of the most powerful men in Chicago, exposed corruption in family court, and saved dozens of children from dangerous situations. The local legal magazine had featured her on the cover the previous month, with the headline "The Defender: How Monica Sehovich Built Chicago's Most Feared Family Law Practice." But it wasn't fear that motivated Monica's clients to seek her out. It was hope. Hope that someone would finally fight for them the way no one had fought for her. After Mrs. Patterson left with a comprehensive legal strategy and the phone numbers for 3 safe houses, Monica checked her watch. Almost time to pick up Darius and Maximus from their after-school program at the prestigious Lincoln Park Academy, where they were both honor students. At 10 years old, her sons were everything she'd dreamed they could be. Darius was contemplative, already showing aptitude for strategy and critical thinking. Maximus was pure charisma, the kind of child who could charm his way out of trouble and rally other kids to his cause within minutes. They both played violin, Darius because he loved the mathematical precision of it, Maximus because he loved performing. They both played soccer, spoke conversational Spanish, and could code in Python. Monica had made sure they had every advantage she'd never had, every opportunity she could possibly provide. "Mom," Maximus called out as she pulled up to the school in her sleek black BMW. Darius got in trouble for arguing with Mrs. Chen about the American Revolution again. "I wasn't arguing," Darius said with wounded dignity as he climbed into the back seat. "I was correcting historical inaccuracies." Monica caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "And how did that go over?" "She gave me extra homework," Darius admitted. "But I was right." "Being right isn't always the same as being wise," Monica said, though she was secretly proud of his refusal to back down from his convictions. "Sometimes you have to pick your battles." "Is that what you do in court?" Maximus asked. "Pick your battles?" Monica considered the question as they drove through Lincoln Park toward their brownstone. She'd bought the house 2 years ago, a beautiful 3-story building with a garden in back and enough space for the boys to each have their own room and a study area. "Sometimes," she said finally. "But when someone is trying to hurt people who can't protect themselves, that's always a battle worth fighting." That evening, as she helped the boys with their homework at the kitchen island, Monica's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. "Sehovich and Associates," she answered, her professional voice crisp and authoritative. "Monica? Monica Sehovich?" The voice made her blood run cold. She hadn't heard it in 8 years, but she would have recognized it anywhere. "This is Monica," she said carefully, motioning for the boys to continue their work. This is Jeff. Jeff Hankins." Monica's hand tightened on the phone. "What do you want, Jeff?" I heard about your law firm, about how successful you've become. I'm really happy for you." "Are you calling to congratulate me? Because if so, you're about 8 years too late." There was a long pause. "Monica, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about you, about us. I made some mistakes. Some mistakes." Monica's voice was deadly quiet. "Is that what you call it? I was young and stupid, and I let my mother influence me too much. I should have supported you. I should have believed in us." Monica looked at her sons, bent over their math homework, completely absorbed in their work. Jeff had no idea they existed. He had no idea that his mistakes had cost him the chance to know these incredible children. "Jeff," she said finally, "I'm going to say this once, and then I never want to hear from you again. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose your mother's approval over your wife. You chose cruelty over compassion. You chose to abandon us when I needed you most. Monica, please." "I'm not finished." Her voice cut through his pleading like a blade. "I've built a life that's better than anything you could have given me. I have everything I ever wanted, and I got it all without you. So whatever midlife crisis or bout of nostalgia brought you to my phone number, deal with it somewhere else. I just thought maybe we could talk, maybe grab coffee and—" "Jeff." Monica's voice was sweetly poisonous. "Go to hell." She hung up and immediately blocked the number, her hands shaking with rage and adrenaline. "Mom?" Darius looked up from his homework, concern written across his features. "Are you okay?" Monica took a deep breath and smoothed her expression back into calm. "I'm fine, baby. Just work stuff." But she wasn't fine. Jeff's call had shaken something loose inside her, some carefully contained fury that she'd been using as fuel for years. He was thinking about her, missing her, wanting to reconnect. The irony was breathtaking. Now that she was successful, now that she'd proven she could thrive without him, now he wanted her back. "Mom," Maximus said, looking up from his science project, "can we make volcano explode bigger tomorrow?" Monica smiled, the rage transmuting into something colder and more purposeful. "We can make it explode as big as you want, sweetheart." Later that night, after the boys were asleep, Monica sat in her home office reviewing case files and planning strategies for the next day's court appearances. But her mind kept drifting to Jeff's call, to the pathetic hope in his voice, to his assumption that he could just waltz back into her life because he'd finally realized what he'd lost. She pulled up Google on her laptop and searched for his name. The results showed he was still working at his family's construction company, which, according to the business pages, was struggling financially. His LinkedIn profile showed no wife, no children, no real accomplishments beyond maintaining a failing business. Monica closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. Jeff Hankins was exactly where she'd expected him to be. Nowhere. Still under his mother's thumb, still living a small life in a small world, still thinking that the universe revolved around his wants and needs. Well, he was about to learn how very wrong he was about that, because Monica Sehovich was no longer the broken woman he'd discarded. She was a queen in her own kingdom, and that kingdom was about to expand in ways that would leave him breathless. The game was about to begin, and this time Monica held all the cards. Chapter 5: Ghosts of Broken Promises. Jeff Hankins sat in his cramped office at Hankins Construction, staring at the stack of overdue bills that seemed to multiply every time he looked away. The company his grandfather had built, that his father had expanded, and that his mother insisted he maintain was slowly dying, suffocated by debt, and Jeff's complete lack of passion for the family business. The irony wasn't lost on him that he'd destroyed his marriage to protect a legacy that was now crumbling in his hands. "Jeffrey," Cordelia's voice cut through the thin walls of the construction trailer like a knife. At 65, she was still formidable, still perfectly coiffed, still treating everyone around her like servants in her personal kingdom. "We need to discuss the Morrison contract." Jeff rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar headache that came with any conversation involving his mother. The Morrison contract was a small residential job that would barely cover payroll for 2 weeks, but Cordelia discussed it like it was a multi-million-dollar development deal. "What about it, Mother?" "The profit margins are too thin. You need to cut costs somewhere." "I've cut everywhere I can cut. We're barely breaking, even as it is." Cordelia's perfectly made-up face twisted into the expression of disappointment that Jeff had been seeing since childhood. "Your father never had these problems. Dad had 25 employees and contracts with the city. We have 6 employees and we're competing with companies that undercut us by 30%. Then maybe you need to work harder." Jeff looked at his mother, this woman who had controlled every aspect of his life for 35 years, and felt the familiar cocktail of guilt, resentment, and exhaustion that defined their relationship. He worked 60 hours a week trying to keep the company afloat, while she played Lady of the Manor and criticized his every decision. "Maybe I do," he said quietly, because arguing was pointless. Cordelia always won their arguments, not through logic or reason, but through sheer force of will and his own inability to truly stand up to her. That evening, Jeff drove to Murphy's Pub, the same bar where he'd been drinking alone 3 nights a week for the past 2 years. The bartender, Tommy, had long since stopped asking what was wrong and just poured Jeff's usual whiskey without being asked. "Rough day?" Tommy asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. "They're all rough days," Jeff replied, staring into his glass. At the other end of the bar, 2 men in expensive suits were talking loudly about a divorce case that had made the news. Something about a custody battle where the husband had tried to hide assets and got destroyed in court by some hotshot female lawyer. "Monica Sehovich," one of them said. "That woman is ruthless. She took Peterson for everything he had, and then some." Jeff's head snapped up. Monica Sehovich. The name hit him like a physical blow. "You know her?" the other man asked. "Know of her. She's got this family law practice downtown, specializes in high-conflict divorces. Men in this city are terrified of her." Jeff fumbled for his phone, hands shaking as he searched for Monica's name. The results filled his screen. News articles, professional accolades, photos of a woman who looked like Monica but seemed impossible. This woman was polished, powerful, confident. This woman wore designer clothes and commanded Chicago's skyline like she owned it. But it was her. Jeff would have recognized those eyes anywhere, even though everything else about her had transformed completely. Monica had become everything she'd never been when they were married. Successful, independent, formidable. The shy legal assistant he'd divorced had metamorphosed into one of Chicago's most prominent attorneys. And he was still sitting in the same bar, in the same small town, working the same failing job he'd hated 8 years ago. Jeff spent the next week obsessively reading everything he could find about Monica's career. She'd graduated from Northwestern Law School summa cum laude. She'd worked at legal aid before starting her own practice. She specialized in protecting women and children from dangerous men. The last part made his stomach turn. Had he been dangerous? Had Monica been afraid of him? The memory of slapping her that last night came flooding back, and Jeff felt sick. He'd been angry, frustrated, hurt by the fertility diagnosis and his mother's constant pressure. But that didn't excuse what he'd done. He'd hit his wife. He'd chosen his mother over the woman he'd promised to love and protect. And then he'd thrown Monica away like she was disposable. Now she was thriving, and he was drowning. "You seem distracted lately," Cordelia said over dinner at her house the following Sunday. She'd insisted on their weekly family dinners after Jeff's father died 5 years ago, another way to maintain control over her adult son's life. "Just thinking about business," Jeff lied. "Well, stop thinking and start doing. The Henderson Project needs your attention." The Henderson Project was a kitchen renovation that would take 3 weeks and net them maybe $2,000 after expenses. Jeff nodded and made appropriate noises, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about Monica every day now, not just about who she'd become, but about who she'd been when they were together. Her laugh when she found something genuinely funny. The way she'd curled against him during movies. how she'd supported his dreams of expanding the business, even when he'd been too afraid of his mother's disapproval to pursue them. Monica had believed in him once. She'd seen potential in him that he'd never seen in himself. And he'd repaid that faith by abandoning her when she needed him most. I ran into Rebecca Morrison at the grocery store, Cordelia continued. Her daughter, Emily, just got engaged to a lovely boy from a good family. Children right away, I'm sure. Jeff's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. This was one of Cordelia's favorite tortures, talking about other people's children and grandchildren, reminding him of what he'd failed to provide her. That's nice for them, he said. Emily's your age, you know. Well, a few years younger. Maybe you should call her Mom. What? You're 35 years old, Jeffrey. Most men your age have wives and families. I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to see some grandchildren before I die. The words hit Jeff like a slap. Grandchildren. Monica had wanted children so desperately. They'd tried for 3 years, endured doctor visits and treatments, and hope that turned to heartbreak month after month. And when they'd finally gotten an answer, when they'd learned about options and possibilities, he'd given up. He'd given up on Monica, on their marriage, on the family they could have built together through adoption or surrogacy, or any of the other paths they'd never explored because he'd been too selfish and too weak to fight for what they both wanted. Maybe I don't want children, Jeff said quietly. Cordelia's face went white with rage. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you want children. Every man wants children. Maybe I'm not every man. You're a Hankins. Hankins men have families. They carry on the name and the legacy. Jeff looked around his mother's dining room, at the family photos covering every surface, at the portrait of his father that Cordelia kept prominently displayed like a shrine. What legacy was she talking about? A failing business? A family known more for social climbing than actual achievement? What if the legacy isn't worth carrying on? He asked. The slap came fast and hard, just like the one he'd given Monica 8 years ago. Cordelia's hand cracked across his cheek with enough force to snap his head to the side. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you insult your father's memory and everything this family has built? Jeff sat there, his cheek burning, and realized that he'd become exactly what his mother had raised him to be. A weak man who let others control his life and paid for that weakness by hurting the people who loved him. Monica had loved him once. Really, truly loved him. And he'd thrown that away because he'd been too much of a coward to stand up to a bitter old woman who'd never been happy a day in her life. I'm sorry, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was apologizing to his mother or to the ghost of the woman he'd lost. That night, Jeff sat in his apartment, the same apartment he'd moved into after the divorce, like he'd been afraid to change anything else about his life, and stared at Monica's phone number on his computer screen. He'd found it on her law firm's website. Professional, successful, untouchable Monica, who probably didn't spare him a thought from 1 year to the next. He should leave her alone. He should accept that he'd made his choices and live with the consequences. But Jeff was tired of living with consequences. He was tired of his mother's control and his own cowardice and the endless, grinding mediocrity of his existence. Monica had escaped. Monica had built something magnificent from the wreckage of their marriage. Maybe, if he was lucky, she'd tell him how she'd done it. Maybe, if he was very lucky, she'd forgive him. With shaking hands, Jeff picked up his phone and dialed her number. Chapter 6. The Golden Cage. 2 months after Monica had hung up on him, Jeff found himself sitting across from Evangeline Cross at Chicago's most expensive restaurant, trying to remember why he'd agreed to this dinner in the first place. Cordelia had arranged it, of course. She'd been arranging his life for 35 years, and Jeff had finally stopped resisting. Evangeline was everything his mother had wanted in a daughter-in-law. She came from old money, possessed impeccable manners, and had been raised to be the perfect wife to a man of suitable standing. She was blonde, petite, and spoke in a soft voice that never rose above conversation level. She was also mind-numbingly boring. The charity luncheon raised nearly $50,000, Evangeline was saying, delicately cutting her salmon into precise squares. Mother was absolutely thrilled. She's already planning next year's event. Jeff nodded and made appropriate sounds while his mind wandered. Monica had never talked about charity luncheons. Monica had talked about books she'd read, cases she'd worked on, injustices that made her angry. Monica had opinions about everything and wasn't afraid to share them, even when they disagreed. Jeffrey. Evangeline's voice brought him back to the present. You seem distracted. Sorry. Long day at work. Evangeline smiled sympathetically. Poor thing. Mother says you work so hard, but that's what makes you such a good provider. A good provider? Jeff almost laughed. He was barely keeping the construction company afloat, living paycheck to paycheck while pretending to be the successful businessman everyone expected him to be. But Evangeline didn't know that. Cordelia had painted a very different picture of their family's financial situation. Tell me about your work, he said, because he was supposed to show interest. Oh, I don't really work, Evangeline replied with a small laugh. I mean, I volunteer with several organizations, of course, but Daddy says women in our family don't need jobs. We have other responsibilities. Other responsibilities, like being decorative and agreeable, and producing the next generation of bland, wealthy children who would repeat the same meaningless cycle. Jeff thought about Monica, probably working late in her downtown office, fighting for clients who needed someone to believe in them. Monica had never been decorative. She'd been passionate, driven, alive in ways that Evangeline could never understand. That must be nice, Jeff said, though it sounded hollow even to him. 3 weeks later, Jeff proposed to Evangeline in the Rose Garden at Navy Pier, exactly as Cordelia had suggested. He'd bought the ring Cordelia had selected, spoken the words Cordelia had helped him rehearse, and knelt on the precise spot where Evangeline had mentioned she'd always dreamed of being proposed to. Evangeline said yes, of course. She'd been saying yes to everything since their first date, agreeing with his every opinion and deferring to his every preference like a well-trained pet. Oh, Jeffrey, she squealed, loud enough to attract the attention of other couples strolling through the garden. It's absolutely perfect. The diamond was perfect. It was also enormous, flashy, and completely tasteless. Everything Monica would have hated. Monica's engagement ring had been modest but elegant, chosen because it reminded Jeff of her grandmother's vintage jewelry that she'd loved so much. He'd pawned that ring 3 years ago to help make payroll. Let's call Mother and Daddy right away, Evangeline bubbled, already pulling out her phone. They'll want to start planning the engagement party immediately. And just like that, Jeff's proposal became about everyone except the 2 people who were supposed to be getting married. The engagement party was held at the Cross family's estate in Lake Forest, a sprawling mansion that made Jeff feel like a poor relation playing dress-up. 200 guests sipped champagne and congratulated Jeff on his excellent choice while he stood beside Evangeline and smiled until his face hurt. She's lovely, person after person told him. You're so lucky. Perfect couple, they said. Made for each other. Beautiful children, they predicted. Gorgeous, well-bred children. Jeff smiled and nodded and accepted their congratulations, while feeling like he was watching someone else's life unfold. This wasn't what he'd imagined when he'd thought about marriage. It wasn't the partnership he'd had with Monica, the sense of building something together. This felt like a business transaction dressed up in white lace and good china. You look handsome tonight, Cordelia said, appearing at his elbow with a glass of champagne and a satisfied smile. Evangeline is everything I hoped she'd be. She's very nice, Jeff said carefully. Nice? Cordelia's laugh was sharp. Jeffrey, she's perfect. She comes from an excellent family. She's been properly raised, and she'll give you beautiful children without any of the complications of your previous marriage. The casual cruelty in his mother's voice made Jeff's stomach turn. Monica's fertility struggles hadn't been complications. They'd been heartbreaking challenges that they should have faced together. "Don't talk about Monica like that," he said quietly. Cordelia's eyes flashed with anger. "I'll talk about that woman however I choose. She was a mistake, Jeffrey. A poor choice that you corrected when you came to your senses. Evangeline is your future now." Jeff looked across the room at his fiancée, who was showing off her engagement ring to a group of her friends. They were all cooing over it like it was the most magnificent thing they'd ever seen, and Evangeline was basking in their attention. "She doesn't love me," Jeff said suddenly. "What?" "Evangeline, she doesn't love me. She loves the idea of me, the version of me you've sold her family. But she doesn't actually know me at all." Cordelia stepped closer, her voice dropping to the venomous whisper Jeff knew so well. "Love is a luxury, Jeffrey. Marriage is about compatibility, shared values, and building a proper family. Evangeline will give you children, maintain your home, and enhance your social standing. What more could you possibly want?" What more could he want? Jeff thought about Monica's laugh, the way she'd challenged him to be better, the conversations that had lasted until dawn because neither of them wanted to stop talking. He thought about the passion that had burned between them, the sense that they were partners in everything. He thought about the family they could have built together if he'd been brave enough to fight for it. "I want what I had before," he said. "What you had before was an illusion," Cordelia snapped. "That woman couldn't give you children. She was holding you back, keeping you from your true potential. Evangeline will help you become the man you're meant to be." The man he was meant to be. Jeff wondered if his mother had any idea who that actually was, or if she'd ever cared about anything beyond molding him into her image of the perfect son. "The wedding will be in June," Cordelia continued, as if the conversation about love had never happened. "Evangeline's mother and I have already started planning. The Ritz-Carlton has agreed to hold the date." "June?" Jeff felt trapped, like the walls were closing in around him. "That's only 4 months away. No point in waiting. You're not getting any younger, and I want to see grandchildren before I'm too old to enjoy them." Grandchildren. There it was again, the pressure that had destroyed his first marriage and was now defining his second. Jeff wondered if he'd ever be allowed to make a choice based on what he actually wanted, rather than what everyone else expected from him. "What if I'm not ready?" he asked. Cordelia's smile was cold and final. "Then you'll get ready. Because this is happening, Jeffrey. You've already proposed, the announcements have been sent, and deposits have been paid. There's no backing out now." Jeff looked around the elegant party, at all the smiling faces celebrating his future, and felt like he was attending his own funeral. In 4 months, he'd marry a woman he didn't love to please a mother who would never be satisfied no matter what he did. And somewhere in downtown Chicago, Monica was probably working late in her corner office, building the life she'd created for herself, surrounded by people who respected and admired her. Monica had escaped this world of expectations and obligations and hollow traditions. Jeff was about to chain himself to it forever. As the evening wore on and guest after guest congratulated him on his engagement, Jeff felt something dying inside him. It might have been hope or dreams, or simply the last remnant of the man he'd been when Monica had loved him. By the time the last guest left and Evangeline kissed him goodnight with the passionless peck that passed for affection between them, Jeff knew with absolute certainty that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But it was too late to stop it now. The golden cage was closing around him, and he'd helped build every bar. Chapter 7. Storm Before the Lightning. Monica stared at the wedding announcement in the Chicago Tribune Society section, her coffee growing cold as she read the details. Evangeline Cross and Jeffrey Hankins to wed at the Ritz-Carlton, Chicago. The photo showed Jeff in a tuxedo beside a blonde woman who gazed at the camera with the vacant smile of privilege. June 15th, Monica murmured to herself. In exactly 6 weeks, Jeff would marry his mother's carefully chosen replacement for the wife he'd thrown away. Mom? Darius appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for school in his uniform blazer and tie. At 10, he carried himself with a dignity that reminded Monica of herself at that age. Serious, observant, always thinking 3 steps ahead. "You look upset." Monica folded the newspaper and smiled at her son. "Just work stuff, sweetheart. Where's your brother?" Still trying to decide between the blue tie and the red tie. He says the blue brings out his eyes, but the red makes more of a statement. Monica laughed despite her dark mood. Maximus had inherited her flair for drama, along with Jeff's devastating green eyes. He was going to break hearts someday, but more importantly, he was going to change the world. Both her boys were. "Tell him to wear the blue," she called as Darius headed back upstairs, "and remind him we leave in 10 minutes. After dropping the twins at Lincoln Park Academy, Monica drove to her office with the wedding announcement burning in her purse like a secret. She'd spent 10 years building a life without Jeff, 10 years proving that she was stronger and more capable than anyone had ever imagined. She didn't need revenge, but she wanted it. "Elena," she called to her assistant as she swept into the law firm, "cancel my afternoon appointments, and get me everything you can find on the Cross family. Financial records, business dealings, social connections, everything." Elena Morales had been with Monica for 3 years, ever since the practice had grown large enough to need a full-time assistant. She was efficient, discreet, and had an uncanny ability to find information that other people preferred to keep hidden. "Should I ask why we're investigating socialites?" Elena asked. "Personal matter," Monica replied. "Also, I need you to find out everything about the Hankins Construction Company, financial status, outstanding debts, business relationships. I want to know if they're struggling as badly as I suspect they are." How deep should I dig? Monica thought about Jeff's phone call 2 months ago, the desperation beneath his casual tone, the way he'd sounded like a man drowning in his own mediocrity. "Deep enough to find the bottom," she said. Over the following weeks, Monica systematically gathered intelligence on Jeff's new life. The Cross family was exactly what she'd expected. Old money, conservative values, and social connections that opened doors. Evangeline was their only daughter, raised to marry well and maintain appearances. The Hankins Construction Company, on the other hand, was a disaster. They were 6 months behind on loan payments, had lost 3 major contracts in the past year, and were operating with a skeleton crew. Jeff's father had left the business heavily mortgaged, and Jeff clearly didn't have the skill or vision to turn things around. "Interesting," Monica murmured, making notes in the margins of the financial reports. "Mom?" Maximus appeared in her doorway, his homework apparently finished. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, baby. Do you ever think about our dad?" The question hit Monica like a physical blow. She'd been so careful over the years, so determined to raise her sons without bitterness or resentment. They knew their father had left before they were born, but she'd never told them the whole truth about why. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Darius thinks we should try to find him. He says every person has the right to know their biological parents." Monica's heart clenched. "And what do you think?" Maximus shrugged, but she could see the longing in his eyes. "I guess I wonder what he's like, whether he'd be proud of us, whether he ever thinks about us. Oh, sweetheart." Monica pulled her son into her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. Your father's absence says nothing about who you are. You and Darius are the most amazing children any parent could ask for. If he doesn't know that, it's his loss, not yours. But don't you think he deserves to know we exist? Monica thought about Jeff's comfortable lies, his loveless engagement, his mother's continued manipulation. Did he deserve to know about these beautiful, brilliant boys? Did he deserve the chance to hurt them the way he'd hurt her? Maybe someday, she said finally, when you're older and can make that decision for yourselves. After Maximus went to bed, Monica returned to her research with renewed focus. She pulled up everything she could find about Jeff's wedding, the venue, the guest list, the photographers who'd been hired to document Cordelia's social triumph. The Ritz-Carlton, Chicago, Saturday, June 15th, 4 p.m. ceremony followed by reception. Black tie required. 200 of Chicago's social elite would be in attendance to witness Jeff's transformation into the man his mother had always wanted him to be. Monica opened her laptop and began typing an email to her favorite private investigator, Marcus Webb. She'd worked with him on dozens of cases, and he'd never failed to deliver exactly what she needed. Marcus, she wrote, I need detailed background checks on Jeffrey Hankins and Evangeline Cross. Focus on any potential scandals, financial improprieties, or personal relationships that might not be public knowledge. Also need security details for their wedding on June 15th. Guest list, venue layout, timing of events. Confidential matter. Urgent. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, her mind already working through possibilities. She wasn't sure yet what she planned to do with the information, but Monica had learned long ago that knowledge was power, and power was the only currency that mattered when you were planning to destroy someone's carefully constructed lies. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Keisha, the same woman who'd given her a couch to sleep on 10 years ago, and who now ran a successful catering business. Girl, you need to get out more. Want to come to dinner with Marcus and me this weekend? He's got a friend I think you'd like. Monica smiled and typed back, Can't this weekend. But rain check? You work too much. When's the last time you went on a date? Monica considered the question. When was the last time she'd been interested in dating anyone? She'd had a few casual relationships over the years, but nothing serious. Nothing that had made her want to risk the life she'd built for herself and her sons. Maybe after June 15th, she'd be ready to think about the future instead of settling accounts with the past. The next morning brought Marcus's preliminary report, and Monica read it over her coffee with growing satisfaction. Jeff's construction company was even worse off than she'd thought. They defaulted on 2 equipment loans and were facing foreclosure on their office building. Evangeline's family, meanwhile, had quietly transferred several assets out of her name in the past 6 months, a sure sign that someone was worried about protecting money from potential creditors. More interesting was the revelation that Cordelia Hankins had personally guaranteed several of the construction company's loans. If the business failed, she would lose her house, her investments, and her carefully maintained lifestyle. No wonder she was desperate to see Jeff married to money. Monica's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Marcus Webb's number. What did you find? She asked without preamble. More than you probably expected, Marcus's gravelly voice replied. Your ex-husband's fiancé has some interesting secrets. Want to meet for lunch? My office, 1 o'clock. And Marcus, this conversation never happened. What conversation? Monica hung up and turned her attention to the most important decision she'd faced in 10 years. She could use this information to destroy Jeff's wedding, to expose the lies and financial desperation that Cordelia was trying to hide behind social climbing and arranged marriages. Or she could walk away and let him marry his perfectly appropriate bride and live his perfectly mediocre life. She thought about her sons, about the questions they were starting to ask, about The day when they would demand the whole truth about their father. She thought about the man who'd slapped her and thrown her away because she couldn't immediately give him children. She thought about justice. Monica opened her calendar and marked June 15th with a simple notation. Wedding. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, it would wash away everything Jeff thought he knew about his safe, controlled world. He'd thrown away his phoenix once. Now she was coming back to burn his golden cage to the ground. Chapter 8. When Thunder Speaks. The Ritz-Carlton Chicago had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, all white roses and crystal chandeliers, with enough flowers to stock a small greenhouse. Monica stood in the hotel lobby, watching the wedding guests arrive in their designer gowns and expensive suits, and felt like a wolf circling a flock of sheep. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a midnight blue Valentino dress that hugged her curves and commanded attention, paired with Jimmy Choo heels that added 4 inches to her already imposing height. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings she'd bought herself to celebrate winning her biggest case last month. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had built an empire from ashes and wasn't afraid to burn down anyone who stood in her way. Beside her, Darius and Maximus stood like young princes in their perfectly tailored navy suits. She debated bringing them, but ultimately decided that Jeff needed to see exactly what his choices had cost him. The boys thought they were attending a family friend's wedding, and Monica had carefully prepared them for what might happen. "Remember," she said quietly as they walked toward the ballroom, "no matter what happens in there, you stay calm and stay close to me." "Yes, ma'am," Darius said, his hand instinctively reaching for his brother's. Even at 10, he had protective instincts that would serve him well in life. Monica checked her watch. 4:15 p.m. The ceremony had started 15 minutes ago, which meant Jeff and Evangeline were probably in the middle of their vows right now. Perfect timing. She approached the uniformed usher at the ballroom doors, a young man clearly overwhelmed by the event's scale. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the ceremony has already begun. I can't seat anyone until—" Monica smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm Monica Sehovich. I believe I'm on the guest list." She wasn't, of course, but she said it with such authority that the young man immediately began scanning his clipboard with growing panic. I don't see your name here, but maybe—" "Don't worry about it," Monica said smoothly, already moving past him. "Family friends of the groom. We'll just slip in the back." Before he could protest, Monica was through the doors with her sons beside her, entering a ballroom filled with 200 of Chicago's most prominent citizens. The ceremony was indeed in progress, with Jeff and Evangeline standing at an altar that probably cost more than most people's cars. Monica positioned herself at the very back of the room, in the shadows where she could observe without being noticed. From here, she had a perfect view of the proceedings and a clear path to the front when the moment came. Jeff looked miserable. Even from a distance, Monica could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing at his mother in the front row, as if seeking permission to breathe. He was going through the motions of happiness, but anyone who'd known him as well as Monica had could see the truth. Evangeline, on the other hand, glowed with the satisfaction of a woman who'd achieved everything she'd been raised to want. She was beautiful in an untouchable way, like a porcelain doll that had never been played with. Her wedding dress probably cost more than Monica's car, and she wore it like armor against the complexities of real life. "Dearly beloved," the minister intoned, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jeffrey Hankins and Evangeline Cross in holy matrimony." Monica felt Maximus shift beside her, his attention caught by something at the front of the room. When she followed his gaze, she saw what had captured his interest. Jeff's face, visible in profile as he faced his bride. "Mom," Maximus whispered, barely audible even to her. "Is that—" "Shh," Monica murmured, her hand finding his shoulder. Wait. The ceremony proceeded with all the warmth of a business merger. Jeff and Evangeline repeated their vows with the enthusiasm of people reading a grocery list, while Cordelia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, the minister continued, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. The traditional pause stretched out, filled with the rustle of expensive fabric and the distant sound of traffic from Michigan Avenue. Monica felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she prepared to step forward. This was it, the moment that would change everything. She stepped out of the shadows and into the aisle, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. I object. This man abandoned his children. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. 200 heads turned toward her in unison, a wave of shocked murmurs rippling through the crowd. At the altar, Jeff went white as a sheet, his mouth falling open in disbelief. Evangeline looked confused, as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. But it was Cordelia's reaction that Monica savored most. The older woman's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, recognition, and then pure, undiluted rage. This man, Monica continued, her voice carrying the authority she'd developed in countless courtrooms, abandoned his children. The murmurs grew louder, shocked exclamations echoing off the crystal chandeliers. Monica began walking down the aisle, her sons beside her, every eye in the room following their progress. "Excuse me," the minister stammered, "but who are you?" "I'm Monica Sehovich," she replied, never taking her eyes off Jeff's stricken face. "And these are my sons, Darius and Maximus Sehovich." She paused at the front of the room, close enough now to see the exact moment when Jeff's gaze fell on the boys, and the truth hit him like a physical blow. The resemblance was unmistakable. They had his eyes, his jawline, his height. There was no question who had fathered these children. 10 years ago, Monica continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, Jeffrey Hankins was my husband. When I couldn't immediately conceive, he divorced me, called me broken, said I wasn't a real woman because I couldn't give him children. Evangeline's perfectly made-up face crumpled with confusion and dawning horror. Jeffrey. What is she talking about? But Jeff couldn't speak. He was staring at Darius and Maximus like he was seeing ghosts, his face cycling through shock, recognition, and something that might have been wonder. 6 months after our divorce, Monica continued relentlessly, I discovered I was pregnant, with twins. I tried to contact him, to let him know he was going to be a father, but his mother, she turned to look directly at Cordelia, threatened to destroy me if I didn't disappear from their lives completely. This is ridiculous, Cordelia said, rising from her seat with as much dignity as she could muster. This woman is clearly delusional. Security should remove her immediately. Should they? Monica reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Because I have medical records proving these children were conceived during our marriage. I have financial records showing that Jeffrey has never paid a single dollar in child support, and I have documentation of the threats his mother made to keep me quiet. The lie about recordings rolled off her tongue smoothly. Cordelia's face went ashen, clearly wondering what evidence Monica might actually possess. Jeffrey, Evangeline said, her voice rising with hysteria, tell her this isn't true. Tell everyone this is some kind of mistake. But Jeff still couldn't speak. He was looking at his sons, with an expression of such naked longing that it was almost painful to witness. Darius, ever the serious one, stepped forward slightly. Are you our father? He asked, his young voice cutting through the chaos with devastating clarity. The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. The entire ballroom held its breath, waiting for Jeff's answer. I dot. Jeff's voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know you existed. Liar, Cordelia shrieked, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "She's lying. She's trying to ruin everything." "The only thing being ruined here," Monica said, her voice like ice, "is the facade you've spent 10 years maintaining. These boys deserve to know their father, and their father deserves to know what his choices cost him." She turned to face Jeff directly, and for a moment it was just the two of them, 10 years of pain and transformation hanging between them like a bridge. "You threw me away," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the stunned silence. "You said I wasn't enough, that I couldn't give you what you needed. But I gave you everything you ever dreamed of, Jeff. I gave you 2 sons who are brilliant and beautiful and better than you ever deserved." "Monica, please." Jeff stepped toward her, his hand outstretched. "No." Monica's voice cracked like a whip. "You don't get to please me. You don't get to pretend this is some tragic misunderstanding. You chose to believe your mother over your wife. You chose to give up rather than fight for our family. You chose to walk away from love because it wasn't easy enough for you. I was young and stupid. You were weak," Monica corrected. "And you still are. Look around, Jeff. Look at this ridiculous circus your mother has orchestrated. You're marrying a woman you don't love to please a woman who will never be satisfied no matter what you sacrifice." Evangeline let out a sob that echoed through the ballroom. "This can't be happening. This can't be real." "It's very real," Monica said, not unkindly. "And I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserve better than a man who's still letting his mother run his life at 35. "Enough!" Cordelia's voice rose to a shriek. "I will not stand here and listen to this nobody destroy my family." Monica turned to face her former mother-in-law, and when she smiled, it was the expression of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. "Nobody?" Monica's laugh was like broken glass. "I'm one of the most successful family lawyers in Chicago. I own a law firm, a house in Lincoln Park, and I've raised 2 children who will change the world. What exactly have you accomplished, Cordelia, besides poisoning your son against anyone who might actually love him?" The ballroom erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. Camera phones appeared as guests began documenting what would surely become Chicago's most talked-about social scandal. "Security!" Cordelia screamed. "Remove these people immediately." But Monica wasn't finished. She pulled a thick folder from her purse and held it up for everyone to see. "Before you call security," she said, her voice carrying over the chaos, "you might want to know that I have complete financial records for Hankins Construction. 6 months behind on loan payments, facing foreclosure, and hemorrhaging money. The only thing keeping them afloat is the Cross family's money, which explains this hasty marriage to a woman Jeff barely knows." Evangeline's father, a distinguished man in his 60s, rose from his seat with murder in his eyes. "Is this true, Hankins?" Jeff looked like a man drowning, his carefully constructed world crashing down around him. "Mr. Cross, I can explain." "Can you?" Monica interjected. "Can you explain how you've been lying to this family about your financial situation? Can you explain how you've let your mother manipulate you into a marriage based on deception and greed?" "Jeffrey," Evangeline sobbed, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks, "how could you do this to me?" And that's when Jeff finally found his voice. "Because I'm exactly who she said I am," he said, his words carrying across the ballroom with devastating clarity. "I'm weak. I'm a coward. And I've been lying to myself for 10 years about who I really am and what I really want." He turned to look at Monica and his sons, and his voice broke. "I want them," he whispered. "I want my boys. I want the family I was too stupid to fight for." "Well, you can't have them," Monica said, her voice final as a judge's gavel. "You gave up that right when you chose her over me." She nodded toward Cordelia, then looked around the ballroom at all the shocked, staring faces. "Ladies and gentlemen, you came here to witness a wedding. Instead, you've witnessed the truth. Jeffrey Hankins is a man who abandons his family when things get difficult and lies to get what he wants. Evangeline Cross is better off without him. Monica took her son's hands and began walking back down the aisle, her head held high, leaving devastation in her wake. Behind her, she could hear Evangeline sobbing, Cordelia screaming accusations, and the general chaos of 200 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. At the ballroom doors, Monica turned back for one last look at the wreckage of Jeff's carefully planned future. He was standing alone at the altar, abandoned by his bride and his mother, staring after the family he'd never known he had and would never be allowed to claim. "Justice," Monica whispered to herself as she walked away. The thunder had spoken, and the storm was complete. Chapter 9. The Slap That Echoed Through Time. Monica had barely made it to the hotel's marble lobby when she heard her name being called. She turned to see Jeff running after them, his expensive tuxedo disheveled, his face flushed with desperation and something that looked like hope. "Monica, wait, please." She stopped, placing protective hands on her son's shoulders as Jeff skidded to a halt in front of them. Up close, she could see the tears in his eyes, the way his hands shook as he stared at Darius and Maximus like they were miracles he was afraid would vanish if he looked away. "Are they really mine?" Jeff's voice broke as he stared at Darius and Maximus like they were miracles he was afraid would vanish. "Yes," Monica said simply. "They're yours, were yours. You gave up any claim to them 10 years ago." Jeff fell to his knees in the middle of the Ritz-Carlton lobby, bringing himself to eye level with his sons. Several wedding guests had followed them out and were watching the scene unfold with fascination, their phones already documenting what would be tomorrow's headlines. "My God," Jeff whispered, reaching out as if to touch Darius's face before stopping himself. "You're beautiful. You're both so beautiful." Darius studied his father with the serious expression that was uniquely his. "Why didn't you want us?" The question hit Jeff like a physical blow. "I did want you. I didn't know you existed. I thought your mother couldn't have children. You thought wrong about a lot of things," Maximus said, his young voice carrying a wisdom that made Monica's heart ache. "Mom says you left because she couldn't get pregnant, but then we happened anyway. If you'd stayed," Darius added with devastating logic, "you would have known about us." Jeff looked up at Monica, his eyes pleading. "I tried to call you. 2 months ago I called because I couldn't stop thinking about you, about us. But you hung up on me." "Because you had nothing to say that I needed to hear," Monica replied coldly. "You didn't call because you missed me, Jeff. You called because your life was falling apart, and you thought I might be able to fix it for you. Just like you always did." "That's not true, isn't it?" Monica's voice cut through his protests. "Your business is failing. Your mother is controlling every aspect of your life, and you're about to marry a woman you don't love for her family's money. So you called your ex-wife, hoping what? That I'd take you back? That I'd solve all your problems?" Jeff struggled to his feet, his face flushing with shame and anger. "You don't understand. I've been trapped, suffocated by my mother's expectations for years. I never wanted this marriage, this life." "Then why are you living it?" Monica's voice rose, drawing even more attention from the hotel staff and remaining wedding guests. "You're 39 years old, Jeff. When are you going to stop blaming your mother for your choices?" "I'm trying to change." "Are you? Because from where I stand, you just ran away from your own wedding instead of being honest with that poor girl you were about to deceive." Behind Jeff, Cordelia appeared in the lobby like an avenging angel, her face twisted with rage, her carefully styled hair slightly mussed from the chaos Monica had left in her wake. "Jeffrey," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "Get away from that woman and those children. This is all lies, all manipulation." "Shut up." Jeff's voice was so quiet that Monica almost didn't hear it, but Cordelia heard it, and her face went white with shock. "What did you say to me?" "I said, shut up." Jeff turned to face his mother, and for the first time in his adult life, there was steel in his voice. "Shut up, Mother, just shut up. Jeffrey, you don't understand what you're doing. This woman is trying to destroy our family." "No," Jeff said, his voice growing stronger. "You destroyed our family. You destroyed my marriage. You've been destroying my life for 35 years, and you just destroyed any chance I had of knowing my own children." Cordelia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd never heard her son speak to her this way, had never encountered resistance to her will. "I tried to protect you," she whispered. "Everything I did was to protect you from making mistakes." "Mistakes?" Jeff's laugh was bitter and broken. "The only mistake I made was listening to you. The only mistake was letting you convince me that Monica wasn't good enough, that our love wasn't real, that I deserved better than the best thing that ever happened to me." He turned back to Monica, his eyes blazing with 10 years of suppressed regret. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I threw away something precious and irreplaceable. But please, Monica, please don't punish my sons for my failures." "Our sons," Monica corrected sharply, "don't need you. They've never needed you. I've raised them alone for 10 years, and they're perfect exactly as they are. But they deserve to know their father. Do they?" Monica's voice was like ice. "Do they deserve to know a man who's so weak he let his mother choose his wife? Do they deserve a father who gives up the moment things get difficult? Do they deserve to have their hearts broken the way you broke mine?" Jeff flinched as if she'd struck him. "I'm not that man anymore." "Prove it," Monica said quietly. "How?" "Tell me how, and I'll do it." Monica looked at this man who had once been her whole world, who had destroyed her so completely that she'd had to rebuild herself from ashes. She thought about the scared, pregnant woman she'd been 10 years ago, begging for scraps of acknowledgement from people who saw her as disposable. Then she thought about who she was now, successful, powerful, feared by men like him throughout the city. She thought about her sons, brilliant and strong and utterly devoted to her. She thought about the life she'd built without him, better than anything he could have given her. "You want to prove you've changed?" Monica asked. "Then let us go. Stop trying to force your way into our lives because you finally realized what you lost. Accept that some things can't be undone, some bridges can't be rebuilt. Monica, please. Accept that you made your choice 10 years ago, and now you have to live with it." Jeff stared at her for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, wedding guests whispered and pointed, documenting his humiliation for social media posterity. Cordelia stood frozen, watching her perfect world crumble around her. "I love you," Jeff whispered, his voice breaking. "I never stopped loving you, and I know that makes everything worse." And that's when Monica felt the final piece of her revenge click into place. Because now she could give him exactly what he'd given her 10 years ago, the agony of loving someone who would never love you back. "I know," she said softly, "and I'll never forgive you for that either." The words hit Jeff like a physical blow, and Monica saw the exact moment when he understood. He would have to live the rest of his life knowing that his children existed, that they were brilliant and beautiful and forever beyond his reach. He would have to live knowing that the woman he'd thrown away had become everything he'd never imagined she could be. He would have to live with the consequences of his choices, just as she'd had to live with hers. "Goodbye, Jeff," Monica said, turning to leave. "Wait." Jeff's voice stopped her. Can I just tell them something, please?" Monica hesitated, then nodded once. Jeff knelt again, looking into the faces of the sons he would never really know. "I want you both to know that your mother is the strongest, most amazing woman I've ever met. And you're lucky to have her. Take care of her for me, okay?" Darius and Maximus nodded solemnly, not fully understanding the weight of the moment, but sensing its importance. Jeff stood and looked at Monica one last time. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything." Monica studied his face, seeing genuine remorse there alongside the pain. After 10 years of anger and hurt, she found that she had one more gift to give him. She stepped forward and, with the same force he'd used on her a decade ago, slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Jeff's head snapped to the side, his cheek immediately reddening with the imprint of her hand. "That," Monica said quietly, "is for the woman you destroyed 10 years ago, the one who begged you to love her enough to fight for your marriage." Jeff stood there, his hand pressed to his burning cheek, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. "And this," Monica continued, taking her son's hands, "is for the woman I became without you." She walked toward the hotel's revolving doors, her head held high, her children beside her. Behind her, she could hear the chaos continuing, Cordelia's voice rising in fresh hysteria, guests excitedly discussing what they'd witnessed, hotel staff trying to restore order. But Monica didn't look back. She'd said everything she needed to say, done everything she'd come to do. The score was settled, the debt was paid, and she was finally, completely, free. Chapter 10, Crown of Fire and Diamonds. 3 months after the wedding that became Chicago's most talked-about social disaster, Monica stood in her corner office watching the city skyline. The headlines had been spectacular. "Wedding Crasher Exposes Groom's Secret Children. Chicago's Most Feared Lawyer Destroys Society Wedding." The story had gone viral within hours, making Monica a symbol of female empowerment and justice served cold. Her law firm had been flooded with new clients, women who'd been dismissed, discarded, and underestimated by powerful men who thought they could control the narrative of their own destruction. Elena knocked on her office door, carrying the afternoon mail and wearing the satisfied smile of someone who'd watched her boss become a legend. "The interview requests are still pouring in," Elena announced, setting down a stack of letters from producers, journalists, and book publishers. Good Morning America called again. They really want you for their Women's Empowerment segment. "Maybe next month," Monica said, her attention caught by a particular envelope mixed in with the fan mail. The return address made her stomach clench. Hankins Construction. "Also," Elena continued, "Dr. Delacroix called to confirm dinner tonight. He said to remind you that Darius and Maximus are excited about the Cubs game this weekend." Monica smiled despite the tension caused by Jeff's letter. Raphael Delacroix had entered their lives 2 months ago, quite literally running into her at the hospital when she'd taken Maximus in for a soccer injury. He was a pediatrician with kind eyes and gentle hands, and he'd charmed both her sons within minutes of meeting them. More importantly, he looked at Monica like she was a wonder, not a conquest. He admired her strength rather than being intimidated by it. And when he kissed her, which he'd done for the first time just last week, she felt something she'd thought was dead forever, the possibility of love without conditions. "Tell him 7 o'clock, Monica said. "And Elena?" "Hold my calls for a few minutes." After Elena left, Monica opened Jeff's letter with hands that barely trembled. The handwriting was the same as she remembered, though perhaps more shaky than it had been 10 years ago. "Monica, I know I have no right to contact you after what happened at the wedding, but I needed you to know how the story ends. Mother moved to Florida 2 weeks ago. She couldn't handle the social humiliation, the way her friends whispered about her at the country club. The house is being sold to pay off the company's debts. Everything she built her identity around is gone. I've closed Hankins Construction. I should have done it years ago instead of trying to preserve something that was already dead. I'm working for a solar energy company now, not glamorous, but honest work for a company that's actually trying to make the world better. I've been going to therapy. Dr. Martinez says I have much work to do, understanding why I let fear control my life for so long. She says healing isn't about forgiveness from others. It's about learning to forgive yourself while accepting that some things can't be undone. I think about Darius and Maximus every day. I wonder what they're learning in school, whether Maximus still wants to be a marine biologist, whether Darius is still reading books about ancient Rome. I wonder if they ever think about me, if they understand why I wasn't there for their first steps, their first words, their first days of school. I know you were right to keep them from me. I know I forfeited any claim to them when I chose my mother's approval over fighting for our family, but I want you to know that meeting them, even for those few minutes, was the most important moment of my life. You were right about everything. I was weak. I was a coward. I threw away something irreplaceable because I was too afraid to stand up to the woman who raised me to be exactly like her, controlling, bitter, and unable to love without conditions. But you were wrong about one thing. You said I'd live the rest of my life knowing what I lost. The truth is, I didn't lose you and our boys. I never deserved you in the first place. You became magnificent in spite of me, not because of me. I'm writing this not because I expect anything from you, but because I needed you to know that your revenge was perfect. You didn't just humiliate me, you freed me. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices, living by my own values, trying to become someone worthy of the love you once gave me. I know it's too late for us. I know you've moved on and built a life that's better than anything I could have given you. But someday, if Darius and Maximus want to know their father, I'll be here. I'll be someone they can be proud of. Thank you for loving me once upon a time. Thank you for giving me 2 sons who will change the world, and thank you for showing me what strength really looks like. With love and regret, Jeff. P.S. I heard about Dr. Delacroix. The boys mentioned him when they called me. Monica's hands stilled on the letter. When they called me? She was still processing this revelation when Darius appeared in her office doorway, looking guilty and determined in equal measure. Mom? Can we talk? Did you call your father? Monica asked, her voice carefully controlled. Darius nodded, his chin lifting with defiance that reminded her powerfully of herself. Maximus and I researched our family history for a school project. We found newspaper articles about the wedding, and they had his company name. We called Hankins Construction and asked to speak with him. Darius, we just wanted to talk to him, her son continued, stepping into the office with the measured pace of someone delivering a prepared speech. We're not trying to hurt you or replace you or anything like that. We wanted to understand. Monica sank into her chair, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Understand what? Why he left. Why he didn't fight for us. Whether he's sorry. And what did you discover? Maximus appeared beside his brother, the two of them presenting a united front. He's really sorry, Mom. Like really, really sorry. He cried when we told him about our science fair projects and our soccer games. He said he knows he doesn't deserve to be our dad, Darius added. But he asked if maybe we could be friends someday. You know, when we're old enough to decide for ourselves. Monica looked at her sons, these brilliant, compassionate boys who'd somehow learned to forgive in ways that she was still struggling with, and felt something shift in her chest. How do you feel about that? She asked carefully. We love you more than anything, Maximus said immediately. You're the best mom in the world, and we never want to hurt you. But, Monica prompted. But he's part of our story, Darius said quietly. And maybe we want to understand that part too. Monica was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the scared woman she'd been 10 years ago and the powerful one she'd become. She thought about revenge and justice and the difference between the two. She thought about her sons, who'd somehow learned grace in ways that she was still learning. "What did you tell him?" she asked finally. "That we'd think about it," Maximus said, "and that any decisions would have to be okay with you first." "Because you're our mom," Darius added, "and you've never let us down." Monica felt tears prick her eyes. These boys, who'd been her salvation and her purpose for 10 years, were teaching her something about forgiveness that she'd never learned in all her courtroom victories. "I need to think about this," she said finally. "We know," they said in unison, and something about their synchronized response made her laugh, despite everything. That evening, as she sat across from Raphael at their favorite restaurant, Monica found herself telling him about Jeff's letter and her son's phone calls. "How do you feel about it?" Raphael asked, his dark eyes serious and understanding. "Terrified," Monica admitted. "For 10 years I've been their whole world. I've protected them from anyone who might hurt them. What if letting him back in, even peripherally, damages what we've built?" Raphael reached across the table and took her hand. "Monica, those boys are extraordinary because you raised them. Nothing can change that. And maybe they're wise enough to handle a relationship with their father in ways that work for all of you." "What if he hurts them?" "What if he doesn't?" Raphael countered gently. "What if he's actually learned something from losing them? What if your revenge was so complete that it actually changed him?" Monica thought about that as they walked along the lake after dinner, Raphael's arm around her shoulders as they watched the city lights reflect on the water. "You know what the strangest part is?" she said finally. "What's that? I'm not angry anymore. For 10 years that anger fueled everything I did. It made me strong, drove me to succeed, pushed me to become someone formidable. But somewhere between slapping him at the Ritz and reading his letter today, it just disappeared. Maybe because the job is done," Raphael suggested. "You set out to prove that you were stronger than he ever imagined, and you succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Maybe now you can focus on what comes next." What came next? Monica looked at this good man who loved her without conditions, who treated her sons like they were precious gifts, who saw her power as something to celebrate rather than something to fear. "What comes next?" she repeated, liking the sound of it. 6 months later, Monica stood in the rose garden behind her Lincoln Park house, watching Darius and Maximus play catch with Raphael while she put the finishing touches on the adoption papers that would make him their stepfather. Jeff had kept his word. He'd worked with a therapist, found meaningful employment, and slowly, carefully, built a friendship with his sons through letters and occasional supervised visits. He'd never pushed for more than they were comfortable giving, never tried to insert himself into their daily lives. When Raphael had proposed 3 months ago, both boys had enthusiastically given their approval. When they'd asked if they could invite Jeff to the wedding, Monica had surprised herself by saying yes. "Mrs. Delacroix," Raphael called out, using the name she'd take in 2 weeks when they married in this same garden. "Come throw the ball with us." Monica laughed and joined her family on the lawn, this beautiful, complicated, perfect family she'd built from the ashes of her old life. As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Monica felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Complete peace. Not the brittle calm of someone holding herself together through sheer will, but the deep, settled peace of someone who'd fought every battle worth fighting and emerged victorious. She'd been broken once, then reborn as something stronger. Now she was exactly who she was meant to be. A woman who'd built an empire from ashes, who'd raised kings from nothing, who'd proven that the best revenge was a life lived magnificently, and she had never been more powerful.